They say that when you build an ivory tower, you spend so much time looking at the clouds that you forget the texture of the dirt beneath your feet. 10 years ago, the board members of St. Jude's Academy sat behind a massive oak table, looking down at my 7-year-old daughter, Lily. To them, she wasn't a bright child with an extraordinary mathematical mind. She was a statistic they didn't want on their books. They saw her wheelchair, they saw her physical limitations, and they saw an inconvenience. Today, I am sitting in a leather chair across from the current headmaster of that exact same academy. The oak table is gone, replaced by glass and steel, but the arrogance in the room remains precisely the same. The school is on the brink of bankruptcy. Their elite donors have vanished, their prestige has faded, and the grand building requires millions of dollars in structural repairs just to keep its doors open. The headmaster looks at me with a desperate, pleading smile, completely unaware that the woman sitting before him, holding the multi-million-dollar endowment check that could save his life's work, is the very same mother he coldly escorted out of his office a decade ago. Before we dive into the depths of how we got here, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel, but only if this story truly connects with you. I would love for you to drop your current location and local time in the comments below. I read every single one, and I want to see how far our community reaches across the world today. Let me take you back 10 years, to the wet, suffocating autumn of 2016. My name is Clara, and at the time I was 28 years old, working 2 jobs as a freelance accountant and a night shift data entry clerk. My husband had walked out on us the moment Lily was diagnosed with a rare spinal condition at birth. He looked at our beautiful girl, looked at the medical equipment, and decided that a life of responsibility wasn't suited for his delicate sensibilities. He left a note on the kitchen counter, emptied our joint savings account, and disappeared into another state. I didn't have time to cry. When you are a single mother to a child with special needs, tears are a luxury you simply cannot afford. Every ounce of your energy goes into survival, into tracking medication schedules, into lifting, into stretching, and into fighting a world that seems systematically designed to ignore your child's existence. Despite her physical challenges, Lily was a marvel. By the age of 4, while other children were learning to color inside the lines, Lily was teaching herself complex multiplication. She didn't see the world in words. She saw it in patterns, in numbers, and in elegant mathematical structures. She would sit on our living room floor, her small, frail legs tucked under her, solving advanced logic puzzles with a speed that left me breathless. She had an insatiable hunger for learning. I spent hours at the public library, exhausting the children's section, then moving to the high school textbooks, bringing home anything that could feed her brilliant mind. When she turned 7, it became painfully clear that the local public school was entirely unequipped to handle her. They wanted to place her in a remedial, isolated classroom simply because they didn't have the resources to accommodate her wheelchair in the advanced placement streams. They wanted to dull her shine so she would fit neatly into their underfunded system. That was when I heard about St. Jude's Academy. It was the premier private institution in our region, known for its rigorous academic curriculum, its state-of-the-art facilities, and its boastful claims of nurturing the leaders of tomorrow. Their website prominently featured slogans about inclusivity, excellence, and shaping the future. I dared to hope. I stayed up for weeks, working extra night shifts to afford the hefty entrance assessment fee. I meticulously filled out the paperwork, attached Lily's psychological evaluations, which placed her IQ in the upper 99th percentile, and prayed for a miracle. The day of the entrance exam arrived. I remember dressing Lily in her favorite yellow cardigan. She was beaming, her eyes bright with anticipation. "Mommy, do you think they have the big math books there? The ones with the hard equations?" she asked, her voice filled with an innocent excitement that broke my heart. "They have everything you could ever want, sweetheart," I told her, kissing her forehead as I wheeled her into the grand, stone-faced building of St. Jude's. The campus looked like something out of a classic movie, manicured lawns, ivy-covered brick walls, and towering oak trees. It felt safe. It felt like the kind of place where a child could truly grow. Lily took the entrance exam in a private room. When she came out 2 hours later, the examiner, an older gentleman with thick glasses, looked visibly shaken. He didn't say a word to me. He just handed a file to the admissions coordinator and whispered something under his breath. A few minutes later, we were called into the office of the headmaster, Mr. Alistair Vance. He was a man in his late 50s, impeccably dressed in a bespoke gray suit, with a sharp, calculated demeanor that made me instantly uncomfortable. He didn't look at Lily. He kept his eyes strictly on the papers on his desk. "Mrs. Vance," I began, introducing myself. "This is Lily." He raised his hand slightly, silencing me before I could even sit down. "Yes, Clara, I have her test results here." He paused, tapping his expensive fountain pen against the mahogany wood of his desk. "Academically, her scores are extraordinary. In fact, she achieved the highest score on our logic assessment in the history of this institution." A wave of intense relief washed over me. I looked down at Lily, who gave my hand a joyful squeeze. "Thank you, sir," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "She works so hard." "However," Mr. Vance continued, his tone shifting into something cold, clinical, and completely devoid of empathy, "St. Jude's Academy is a holistic institution. We do not look merely at test scores. We look at the overall integration of the student into our campus culture." I felt the air leave my lungs. "I don't understand," I stammered. Mr. Vance finally looked up, his gaze fixing on Lily's wheelchair, then drifting to me. "Our campus is historic, Clara. It is over 100 years old. We have stairs, elevated entryways, and multi-level classrooms. The physical alterations required to accommodate Lily's unique situation would cost this school tens of thousands of dollars. Furthermore, our curriculum demands rigorous physical education and outdoor leadership exercises. Lily would not be able to participate. It would cause a disruption to the flow of our standard student body. She doesn't need to do physical education to solve equations," I argued, my voice rising as a dangerous heat flooded my chest. "She can learn from the ground floor. We can adapt. Your website says you welcome all brilliant minds." Mr. Vance offered a tight, patronizing smile. "Marketing materials are designed to express an ideal, Clara. The reality is one of pragmatism. We are a private business. The return on investment for accommodating one student at the expense of our structural budget simply does not align with our board's current directives. I am running an elite academy, not a charity. I'm afraid Lily's application is rejected. I suggest you look into specialized public programs that deal specifically with children of her limitations." The word limitations rang in my ears like a physical blow. I looked down at Lily. The bright, hopeful spark in her eyes had completely vanished. At 7 years old, she was old enough to understand exactly what was happening. She was being discarded, not because her mind wasn't good enough, but because her body was seen as a financial liability. "Look at her," I whispered, tears of absolute rage finally spilling over my eyelids. "Look at her face and tell her she isn't welcome here." Mr. Vance didn't look. He simply stood up, opened his office door, and gestured for us to leave. "Good luck to you, Clara. My decision is final. Please see the receptionist on your way out." I wheeled Lily out of that beautiful, cruel building in complete silence. The heavy wooden doors of St. Jude's Academy slammed shut behind us, the sound echoing through the courtyard like a definitive sentence. We sat at the bus stop in the pouring rain, Lily's small hands gripping the fabric of her yellow cardigan. She didn't cry. Instead, she looked up at me with an expression of quiet, devastating maturity that no 7-year-old should ever possess. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice cracking slightly, "am I broken?" That question shattered something fundamental inside of me. It broke the scared, struggling single mother I had been, and in her place, it forged something entirely different. A fierce, unyielding determination took root deep in my soul. "No, Lily," I said, kneeling in front of her wheelchair, grabbing her small shoulders and looking directly into her eyes. "You are not broken. Their world is broken, and we are going to build our own." From that precise moment, my entire life became about one singular goal, proving Alistair Vance and his elite board completely wrong. I refused to let my daughter be defined by the walls that chose to shut her out. If the world wouldn't build a ramp for her, then we would buy the ground beneath their feet and pave our own path. But back then, we had nothing. We returned to our cramped, two-bedroom apartment and I went to work. I stopped sleeping more than 3 hours a night. I took on a third job managing accounts for a local tech startup. I immersed myself in the world of financial markets, algorithmic trading, and venture capital, studying until my eyes bled from the harsh light of my cheap laptop screen. I didn't just want to earn a living anymore. I wanted to build an empire. And as the months turned into years, Lily grew, her mind sharper than any blade. She became my partner in everything. By the time she was 12, she wasn't just doing math. She was helping me analyze market trends, developing proprietary algorithms that predicted stock fluctuations with an eerie, terrifying accuracy. We were a team born out of rejection, working in the shadows of a world that had written us off. 10 years passed. 10 long, brutal, exhausting years of silent building. The world had no idea who we were, but the foundation was set, and the storm we were creating was about to make landfall right on the doorstep of the school that had deemed my daughter a financial liability. The transformation of our lives didn't happen overnight, but it happened with the cold, systematic precision of a mathematical equation. While the rest of the world slept, Lily and I lived in a universe constructed entirely of data, financial charts, and relentless ambition. By the time Lily was 14, her natural aptitude for mathematics had evolved into something truly formidable. We had moved past basic high school textbooks. She was now auditing advanced university lectures online, breaking down the mechanics of quantitative trading and machine learning algorithms before she even had a driver's license. I remember a specific night in the winter of 2021. The radiator in our small apartment was clanking loudly, throwing out a dry, insufficient heat. Lily sat at the kitchen table, her laptop screen reflecting off her glasses. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, executing lines of code that she had designed herself to track micro-movements in the tech sector. "Mommy," she had said, not looking up from the screen, her voice calm and steady. "The market is inefficient. People trade on emotion, fear, greed, pride. But numbers don't have feelings. If we isolate the pride, we can predict exactly when an overvalued asset is going to collapse." I looked at my daughter, her physical frame still fragile, still bound to the wheelchair that St. Jude's Academy had deemed too expensive to accommodate. Yet her mind was a towering skyscraper, looking down at the very financial institutions that ran the city. "Then let's isolate the pride, sweetheart," I told her, placing a warm cup of tea next to her hand. We started small. I took the meager savings I had managed to scrape together from my 3 jobs, roughly $5,000, and placed it entirely under the management of Lily's proprietary algorithm. Within 6 months, that $5,000 had turned into $50,000. Within a year, it was $500,000. We weren't just guessing. We were anticipating the market's behavior with a precision that felt almost supernatural. By 2024, when Lily was 15, we formally launched our own private investment fund, Minerva Capital. We didn't open a grand office downtown. We didn't hire flashy brokers or throw lavish launch parties. We operated entirely from a modest, secure office space, keeping our identities strictly confidential. To the financial world, Minerva Capital was a ghost, a highly successful, multi-million-dollar entity that appeared out of nowhere, consistently beating the market standard week after week, led by an anonymous managing partner. But while our wealth grew into an empire, I never forgot the wet autumn morning at the bus stop. I never forgot the heavy sound of St. Jude's wooden doors slamming shut, or the broken look in my 7-year-old daughter's eyes when she asked if she was broken. I kept tabs on St. Jude's Academy the way an accountant tracks a bad debt. And by the start of 2026, the data showed exactly what Lily had predicted years ago. Pride was causing their collapse. St. Jude's Academy had spent decades relying on its historic reputation and the deep pockets of a few elite, old-money families. But times had changed. The school's administration, still led by the arrogant Headmaster Alistair Vance, had refused to modernize. They poured millions into superficial renovations, manicured lawns, state-of-the-art equestrian facilities, and lavish galas to maintain their elitist image, while neglecting their core academic infrastructure and accumulating massive amounts of high-interest debt. Then the inevitable happened. Two of their largest historic donors pulled out after a highly publicized corporate scandal, leaving the Academy with a massive, multi-million-dollar deficit. They were exposed, vulnerable, and completely desperate. They needed a massive financial endowment immediately, or the bank would foreclose on the historic campus before the start of the next school year. They began quietly reaching out to private investment firms, looking for an institutional savior, someone who would write a massive check to bail them out in exchange for a seat on the board and naming rights to the new science pavilion. When the inquiry landed on the desk of Minerva Capital, I knew the universe had finally brought the equation full circle. "They are asking for $7 million, Mom," Lily said, sitting across from me in her customized, high-tech wheelchair in our private office. She was 17 now, beautiful, highly poised, and possessed an aura of quiet authority that demanded respect from anyone who met her. She turned her monitor toward me, displaying St. Jude's audited financial statements. "They are entirely insolvent. Without this funding, the school closes its doors in 30 days. Mr. Vance's entire life's work, his legacy, will be completely erased." I looked at the documents. I looked at the name *Alistair Vance signed at the bottom of the desperate formal request for funding. A cold, sharp satisfaction settled deep in my chest. "What do you want to do, Lily? It's your algorithm that earned this money. It's your decision." Lily looked down at her hands for a moment, then looked up, her eyes clear and unyielding. "I want to take the meeting, Mom, but I don't want them to know it's us. Not yet. I want you to go in as the sole representative of Minerva Capital. Let them believe their savior has arrived. Let them celebrate. And then I want to attend the final signing ceremony myself." "Are you sure you're ready for that, sweetheart?" I asked softly, remembering the trauma of that rejection. "Mom," Lily replied, a faint, confident smile touching her lips, "I've spent 10 years solving problems far more complicated than Alistair Vance. I'm ready." The preliminary negotiations went exactly as planned. Operating through our legal counsel, Minerva Capital agreed to review the school's bailout proposal. We explicitly demanded that the identity of our primary principal investor remain strictly anonymous until the final contract signing, citing standard corporate privacy protocols. Desperate for the cash, the school's board agreed to every single one of our terms without hesitation. They didn't care where the money came from. They only cared that the $7 million check was real. Which brings us right back to the headmaster's office. I am sitting across from Alistair Vance. 10 years have aged him significantly. His hair is completely silver now, and the confident, untouchable posture he carried a decade ago is gone, replaced by the slumped shoulders of a man drowning in financial ruin. He looks at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of reverence and intense relief. He believes I am a wealthy, high-powered venture capitalist who has chosen his school out of pure philanthropic admiration. "Clara," he says, his voice carrying an sycophantic warmth that makes my stomach turn. "I cannot begin to express the profound gratitude of the entire board of St. Jude's Academy. Your firm's willingness to step in at this critical juncture is nothing short of a miracle. This $7 million endowment will not only clear our debts, but it will secure our legacy for the next generation of leaders." I look at him, my expression entirely unreadable. I deliberately choose not to correct him on my name or drop any hints about who I am. "The contract is finalized, Mr. Vance," I say, my voice calm, measured, and formal. "Minerva Capital will fully fund the school's debt and provide the necessary capital for structural updates. However, as stated in the pre-agreements, our funding comes with absolute, non-negotiable conditions regarding structural restructuring and board oversight." Of course," Vance says quickly, nodding vigorously as he slides a thick leather-bound document across the desk toward me. "We have already prepared the signing documents. We agree to all your terms. Our board members are currently waiting in the grand banquet hall downstairs for the formal announcement. We've invited local press, our faculty, and our student representatives. It's a historic day for St. Jude." "Excellent," I say, standing up from the leather chair. "But before we head downstairs to sign the final documents in front of your board and the press, there is one final detail. The primary principal investor of Minerva Capital, the mind behind the entire fund, has just arrived on campus. She wishes to witness the signing personally. Vance blinks, his smile faltering slightly in surprise. Oh, I was under the impression you were the sole decision-maker, Clara. We weren't expecting the principal investor. But please, by all means, welcome her. It would be an absolute honor to thank her face to face. Where is she? I walk over to the heavy wooden office door, the very same door that had locked my daughter out 10 years ago. I turn the handle, swing it open wide, and step aside. The sound of electric wheels hums softly in the quiet hallway. Alistair Vance stands up from his desk, adjusting his suit jacket, preparing his best, most charming professional smile. But as the high-tech wheelchair rolls smoothly across the threshold and stops directly in the center of his office, his smile completely freezes. Lily sits elegantly in the chair, dressed in a tailored navy blue blazer, her hair styled perfectly, her posture exuding an undeniable, commanding brilliance. She looks directly into Alistair Vance's eyes, her expression completely serene, holding a folder containing the certified $7 million bank draft in her lap. Vance looks at her, then looks at me, a sudden, terrifying realization beginning to dawn in his eyes. The blood slowly drains from his face, leaving him completely pale. He recognizes the eyes. He recognizes the face. The memory of the single mother and the 7-year-old child he discarded a decade ago hits him like a physical blow. You, Vance whispers, his voice trembling as he grips the edge of his mahogany desk for support. It's you. Lily smiles a direct, confident smile right at him. Hello, Mr. Vance, she says, her voice echoing with absolute authority. I believe you told my mother 10 years ago that I was a financial liability. It turns out your entire legacy is now my asset. The silence inside the headmaster's office became so heavy it felt structural. Alistair Vance stood paralyzed behind his desk, his eyes darting frantically between Lily's serene, beautiful face and the crisp, official documents resting on her lap. The absolute, unyielding power dynamic in the room had shifted entirely. 10 years ago, he had been the gatekeeper, the elite arbiter of who was worthy of an education and who was a mere structural burden. Now, he was looking at the teenager who held the entire financial survival of his historic institution in the palm of her hand. This cannot be, Vance stammered, his fingers trembling violently as he reached down to adjust his silver tie. Minerva Capital it's a major institutional fund. It's backed by international quantitative algorithms. A child cannot. You are 17 years old. A child whose logic and mathematics assessment scores were the highest in the history of your academy, Mr. Vance, Lily replied, her voice remaining entirely calm, sweet, and level. She didn't raise her tone. She didn't need to. The quiet authority in her words filled every corner of the room. The algorithm that built Minerva Capital was designed by me, in a small 2-bedroom apartment, using public library textbooks and an old, second-hand laptop. The same laptop my mother bought by working 3 shifts after you told her that accommodating my wheelchair wasn't a sound return on investment. Vance's chest rose and fell rapidly. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for some kind of corporate mercy, some indication that this was a cruel joke. But I merely stood beside my daughter's chair, my arms crossed, watching him with the cold, detached gaze of an accountant reviewing a bankrupt balance sheet. Clara, Vance said, his voice cracking, turning to me with absolute desperation. We have a pre-agreement. The board is waiting downstairs. The press is already in the grand hall. If you pull this funding now, if Minerva Capital walks away today, the bank forecloses on the campus tomorrow morning. The school will be forced to dissolve. Over 100 years of history wiped out in a single day. We aren't walking away, Mr. Vance, I said, stepping forward and placing a hand gently on Lily's shoulder. We are investors, and as investors, we strictly enforce our conditions. We are going down to that banquet hall right now. We are going to sign these documents in front of your board, your faculty, and the media. But you are going to listen very carefully to the new terms of this endowment before we step out of this room. Lily opened the folder on her lap, sliding a single, revised page across the glass table. The $7 million will be transferred to the school's account immediately upon signing, Lily stated, her clear eyes locked onto his pale face. However, effective immediately, the bylaws of St. Jude's Academy are permanently amended. The current board of directors is dissolved. A new oversight committee, appointed entirely by Minerva Capital, will assume full operational control of the school's budget and administrative appointments. Vance gasped, looking at the paper. You're stripping the board of their power. They are the oldest families in the state. They are the families who allowed this institution to become a bloated, elitist country club that accumulates debt while ignoring brilliant minds, Lily countered firmly. Furthermore, Section 4 dictates that your current position as headmaster is subject to a mandatory, immediate probationary review. Your salary will be reduced by 60%, with the excess funds directly reallocated to our primary mandate, the complete structural overhaul of this entire campus. She tapped the document with her pen. Every single staircase, every elevated entryway, every historic building on this property will be fitted with state-of-the-art automated ramps and elevators within the next 6 months. St. Jude's Academy will become the most physically accessible, inclusive premier educational institution in the country. And you, Mr. Vance, will personally oversee the construction. You will sign off on every blueprint, every ramp, and every elevator. You will spend the remainder of your career building the exact accessibility you claimed was too expensive to accommodate 10 years ago. Vance sank slowly back into his leather chair, looking completely broken. The ultimate poetic irony of his sentence was undeniable. He wasn't being fired. He was being kept on as a subordinate, forced to use his remaining years to dismantle the very elitist barriers he had spent his life protecting. His legacy wouldn't be erased. It would be utterly rewritten by the very girl he had discarded. You have 2 choices, sir, I told him, my voice cutting through his despair like a blade. You can refuse these terms, walk downstairs, and announce to the press and your board that St. Jude's Academy is officially bankrupt and closing its doors forever because your pride wouldn't allow you to accept a disabled girl's charity. Or you can swallow your arrogance, pick up that pen, and walk downstairs with us to save your school under our terms. Choose now. For a long, agonizing minute, the only sound in the office was the ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the corner. Vance looked down at his trembling hands. The realization that he had absolutely no leverage, no alternatives, and no escape route finally settled over him. Slowly, with a hollow, defeated sigh, he reached into his jacket pocket, drew his expensive fountain pen, and signed his initials to the revised terms page. Good, Lily said, her smile returning. A beautiful, confident smile that radiated pure triumph. Now, let's go meet your board. The grand banquet hall downstairs was filled with a bright, energetic hum. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over rows of polished mahogany tables. The entire board of directors, dressed in expensive suits and designer dresses, sat in the front rows, whispering excitedly among themselves. Local journalists stood at the back of the room, their cameras set up, flashes going off occasionally as they prepared to cover the massive financial rescue of the city's most prestigious school. When the side doors opened and Alistair Vance walked out onto the elevated stage, a polite, thunderous applause erupted throughout the hall. But as Vance stepped aside, and I wheeled Lily out onto the stage next to the main signing table, the applause began to stutter, slowly dying down into a sea of confused whispers. The board members leaned forward, frowning, looking at each other, trying to understand why a 17-year-old girl in a wheelchair was taking center stage at a multi-million-dollar corporate signing ceremony. Vance stepped up to the microphone. His voice, usually booming and filled with elite confidence, sounded frail, hollow, and strained. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the board, faculty, and press, he began, clearing his throat nervously. Today marks a monumental turning point for St. Jude's Academy. We are officially signing the contract for a $7 million endowment that ensures the survival and future of our historic institution. This monumental funding is provided entirely by Minerva Capital. He paused, swallowing hard, his eyes casting a brief, terrified glance toward Lily. It is my distinct honor to introduce the founder, primary principal investor, and new chair of the Oversight Committee for St. Jude's Academy, Miss Lily Vance. A collective gasp echoed through the grand hall. Two senior board members instantly stood up from their seats, their faces twisted in shock and outrage. "Alistair, what is the meaning of this?" one of them demanded loudly. "Who is this child? Where are the institutional partners of Minerva Capital?" Lily rolled her chair forward, directly to the secondary microphone set up on the table. She adjusted it calmly, looking out at the wealthy, stunned crowd with absolute serenity. "The institutional partners are sitting right here." Lily's voice rang out through the speakers, clear, resonant, and completely commanding the room. 10 years ago, my mother brought me to this very academy. I had achieved the highest entrance score in your school's history. Yet this board and your headmaster rejected me. You told my mother that my wheelchair was a financial liability, an inconvenience that didn't align with your return on investment. The room became so quiet you could hear the hum of the video cameras recording every single word. The journalists at the back immediately raised their lenses, focusing intently on Lily's face, sensing the massive, viral human interest story unfolding before their eyes. "For 10 years, Lily continued, her gaze sweeping across the stunned faces of the board members, "my mother and I built our own path. We built a fund based on numbers, logic, and precision. Today, Minerva Capital has purchased your debt. We have bought your liabilities. I am not here as a charity case, and I am not here to seek your approval. I am here as your primary creditor. I am funding this entire school because while you believed my body had limitations, I knew your vision was blind. From this day forward, St. Jude's Academy will no longer be an exclusive club for the privileged few. It will be an accessible haven for every brilliant mind, regardless of the physical vessel it resides in." She turned smoothly, picked up the final contract, and signed her name in bold, elegant strokes across the primary investor line. She handed the pen to Alistair Vance, who, with a completely defeated expression, signed his own name underneath, sealing the absolute transfer of power in front of every flashing camera in the room. The silence in the hall lasted for 3 full seconds before a young faculty member at the back began to clap. Then another joined. Within moments, the sheer emotional weight and poetic justice of the moment broke through the elite stiffness of the room, and an overwhelming roar of applause filled the banquet hall. I looked down at my daughter. She looked up at me, her eyes shining with tears of pure vindication, her hand reaching up to squeeze mine. The wet autumn morning at the bus stop, the years of sleepless nights, the exhaustion, the isolation, every single ounce of pain was completely washed away in the brilliant light of her absolute victory. We hadn't just survived their rejection, we had entirely redefined the world that tried to shut us out. Now that we have reached the end of this incredible journey, I want to ask you a deeply personal question. If you were in Lily's position, would you have saved the school that rejected you just to force them to change? Or would you have let them go completely bankrupt and build a brand new school from scratch? Drop your thoughts and answers in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If this story brought a tear to your eye or made you believe in the power of poetic justice, please share it with someone who needs to know that their current limitations do not define their ultimate destination. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories just like this one. Check out the video description below for another incredible tale of resilience that I know will hit you just as hard. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the very next story.